now that we've just had this amazing defensive draft class, I thought you'd just call out a couple of the stars to watch. Now, when we're talking about the rush, really talking about a specific aspect of the rush. Now, I know edge rushers have to do 1,000 different things on the field, but really getting excited about their ability to get a sack under 3 seconds. Right? So if you remember last time we were breaking down and looked at where sacks happened, and most sacks happen over 4 seconds. Now, when you look at that, that is way after the average time to release. So something else has happened. The offensive plan has gone foul. So I really see these rush sacks as the sexiest of the sacks. Okay, they're the rarest, but there's just something about getting to the quarterback before they can move. Now, one of the things when we looked at that 2017 draft class is we were just looking at their combine 40. And specifically the first 5 yards, and then breaking down the rest of it. And if you remember, Myles had that top speed. He was number one over that second 20. Where if you look at TJ, he was number one when it came over that first bit. When we started to look at it through the lens of power, so their body weight times their speed. Now, in that, we could see the bias to TJ having sacks earlier on the clock as opposed to Myles later on the clock, and you can see, 85% of his sacks are happening in 5 seconds or higher, where TJ has that 55 4 seconds or lower. So taking that same idea and again sort of separating the edge rushers, okay, who's going to bias to be a rusher and who's going to bias to be a chasers. So from the chasers, there's some pretty also, I don't talk about the actual time. I think it's more useful for coaches to talk about yards per second. So when you see their 9.16, that is yards per second. I think that has more utility to the coach to know how they could use the players. So how much distance they can cover in 1 second. So yeah, that kid the Panthers picked up, he's a rocket. We haven't seen anything like that before. But I think really the first and the fifth pick there, because of their skill sets across everything, are going to be exciting to watch. And I think Williams, I trust DQ that he could work some magic with this guy. But as chasers, I think that these are quite obvious. So when we're talking about the rush sack, and again to refresh your memories, we're talking about power at first contact. So in the 6 years that I've been doing this now, I've never seen a edge rusher break an O-line in the NFL without at least 900 pounds of rolling momentum. Right now, between 900 and 1,200 pounds, give or take a couple, you can break the O-line, but you need to force an error. Okay, you need to force one or they need to make one. But anyone that has 1,200 pounds or more is going through 100% of the time. There's not an O-lineman that can stop someone rolling 1,200 pounds or more. So knowing that's the magic number, we can then start looking at the combine, like who actually has the ability to do this. This year, we were really spoiled for choice. So rather than just talking about the long list of people who potentially could be used this way, like who are the high potential, who are the sub-3 sack specialists that we could really look at. So to do that, and because we didn't have 5-yard data this year, just looking at 10 yards, just extended the acceleration trace. So what we're looking for is those that can generate 1,650 pounds or more at the 10-yard line and be traveling at 6 yards per second or more, right? So when we look at the rushes, there were 4 guys that really stood out in terms of being 1,650 pounds or more, right? But then when you add in the speed, these two jumped off. Right. Now, obviously, the Jags did exceptionally well picking up the big fella, but I think if the Cardinals coaches use Thomas as a sub-3 specialist, if there's a 3rd and long and he's on the field, that's going to be fun to watch. If the Cards use him in the right way, the Cards GM and front office are going to look like heroes. So that would be one to watch there. But the 2 most exciting edge rushers haven't been spoken about yet. And this is potentially a little controversial, but I think there's an opportunity. Because if you can just remember that those magic numbers, 1,650 and 6 seconds or more, there's 2 guys that could produce these numbers. Now check out that 2,000 pounds. In the 6 years, I haven't seen anyone be able to do that. right? Looking at the draft data, the combine data, and even that 1836 combo, that is something special. But they don't have the DE or the E after their names, right? They've got DTs. But if the Eagles and Packers were to get crazy and break with convention and put these guys on the edge for a 3rd and long, I think some really cool shit could happen. So I think this is one of the more exciting ones for me, is that if we're really looking at the ability to destroy an O-line because you can generate enough power, these two really jump off the page. So then in terms of next steps, to really predict how they're going to perform this year, I'd be looking at the schedule for each of the teams, looking at the average quarterback release times, and look at what those tendencies were and how they could be used. But as the season rolls on, we're going to get a bit of data on which O-line breaks under what conditions. So like last year, going into the back end of the season, TJ's schedule favored over Myles because the O-lines were letting people through at around 1,100, where TJ's were and where Myles was a bit longer. So I do think the schedule and the offensive lines they're coming up against does bias their potential to get sacks. But then for the rusher, I think the big one, like if these are the abilities we've got, and you know how I break down performance, ability, capacity, and consistency. Now we've got to look at their capacity. How many times can they produce this? Okay, what's their speed for recovery? And I think going into training camp and starting to look at what these guys are really capable of is going to be incredibly exciting. But I think we're really spoilt this year with that class, and I think those two guys in the middle of the D line, if they were shifted out, they could we could have some good times. But just wanted to call out those guys there, Mike.
Paul, who do you think is the best value? Obviously, it's interesting that you have Walker rated so high. Clearly, that's why you want one overall. But is there one player that really stands out to you, like for upside compared to where they were drafted?
Yeah, I think the Cards did well with that guy because like his numbers are almost the same as Walker if we're looking at it through the lens of someone who's a sub-3 specialist. And I just want to preface that again. I'm just looking at that ability to get the sexiest of the sacks because it's the rarest of the sacks. Because if you look at it, the edge rusher is the only proactive position on the field if they're going for it. Everyone else has to react to something else, right? So the ability to line up the right guy at the right time, like a 3rd and long, a 3rd down specialist, they need to have those abilities. So that's why I think the Cards got some really good value with that guy if they use him the right way.
Yeah, makes sense.
Hey, I got a question. Paul, I watched, I think Thomas had 10 or 11 sacks this year, and I watched all of them, and only one of them came when he actually beat the offensive tackle. All the others were secondary sacks. Yeah. So, I don't know how how all this comes about other than just seeing what you put on the screen. But, when I watched him, I thought to myself, well, he's not really beating people, and which he really didn't do when you watch his tape.
No, he didn't. And that's where I think like it's it's the use case, because those numbers that I put up for the NFL, they are all over the place in college. Right? Like you don't have to apply that in college in the same way. You can break an O-line in college 600 pounds, 700 pounds. So I think that's the danger of getting juiced on a kid for his stats in college as opposed to what are his abilities, what is he capable of. But I do think his potential is incredibly high. But to Mike's point, taking him one, yeah, okay. But I think the Cards taking that guy down there for the same type of numbers and stats. And if you look at the sacks that he got in college, he was running over people. Because one of the things, if you look at Brooke, he's got some good speed, but he doesn't have confidence at collision. When I looked at his numbers, I thought, okay, he's got some good stuff there. You go back and look at the tape. He's got some good numbers, but he doesn't have that confidence at collision. And I think that's something that probably won't allow him to translate to the NFL unless that's addressed. Yeah.
Paul, is it unusual to have defensive tackles that when you move out like that, are that potentially effective, or is that something you see every year?
No, I haven't seen that before.
It's because their first step is so quick and they're so big and powerful. Is that the combination that's accounting for it?
Yeah, the first 3 steps. It's those guys are talented athletes. they're you talk about explosive athleticism or urgent athleticism, but for the size and the speed those guys can move, I think Greg was talking about their stride length, the ability for them to generate power of those first three steps. I'd love to look at their 5-yard speeds, but as they go through training camp, I think we'd get a bit more information on really what they're going to be able to do.